So, welcome to Responsible Business Conversations, where leaders think differently. So, this is a series that is brought to you by Integrated Thinking Solutions. And here we delve into environmental, social, and governance issues and business practices that put our future at risk. Here we are courageous leaders. This is a space for courageous leaders to step forward, to think boldly, to think differently in order to shape tomorrow's responsible business. In this session today, we are going to be having a topic around advancing women leadership into strategic positions. It's not just about advancing women, it's about supporting them, and it is about ensuring that they have the ability to thrive in those positions. And the topic that we're going to be speaking under, or more the theme that we're speaking under, is that the theme is it's not whether women are ready to lead, it's whether culture is ready to let them. Today, I'm not going to be having this conversation by myself. I am going to be having this conversation with the brilliant, powerful Boikanyo Mazibuko, who has held a number of executive positions, as well as currently is in strategic leadership positions currently as she stands. And I am so excited to unpack this particular topic with her because I know authentic leadership is something that is very close to her heart. And so, Boikanyo, welcome to Responsible Business Conversations. How are you doing?
I'm very well. Thank you so much, Namsa, for having me. I'm really, really looking forward to a very, very powerful and timely conversation.
No, definitely. As I introduced you earlier on, Boikanyo, I mentioned that you have held senior executive and board positions, and you still hold board positions. What drew you to leadership and what keeps you there? Because it's been over a decade.
Yeah, no, it's been, way over more than a decade. I think as a young, engineer, sometime in my career, I got curious. I think it was curiosity first of all, Namhla, that drew me to leadership, and it was coming from a position of I was really interested to understand how companies or organizations direction, vision, and most importantly, decision making is actually done. I wanted in on that. I wanted to understand it, and I wanted to be part of it. So I think I came. It came as a curious thing because I didn't really have my own, role models that I could point to and say I want to be like that woman one day. It was just a matter of I was curious, and and then part of it was it looked like they were in charge, and I wanted to be part of this people that are in charge of what, and making decision for the rest of us here. So I think it came from that perspective. And then what has kept me there? I think once I got in and started understanding, when I was given almost like not even given the seat, I went and actually asked for the seat at the table. I didn't wait for promotion. I asked for it. I studied to just support that as well, so that I could be able to have a way to say, yes, I don't want to be technical anymore only, but I also want to understand how to also be in a leadership position in a company. And what has kept me there really has been, once I got in, understanding the conversations that were happening in the executive meetings, or in board meetings for that matter. And it was from those conversations that I thought, okay, I think one can actually make an impact And that's partly why I also did my undergrad in engineering, was to make an impact in the world. I thought I want to also now be able to make an impact, in the way that companies' futures are being shaped, which then impacts everybody below it. So then I understood that there's also a language, to this thing, and there's a way that things get communicated when you are in this thing, So it was about learning that, and it's something that you don't learn in any executive education of any type. Is being there and understanding the language of the guys that are, or the girls that are around the room. So that was really, in a nutshell, my story into leadership, so as to speak.
Love it, love it. I love when you said you asked for it.
Yes.
You knew, you saw yourself belonging there, and you went and you asked for it. You've mentioned that you had obviously the ability to navigate through it. So what's your one lesson that you learned early on about navigating power and influence as a woman leader in some of these spaces?
I think I touched on the language, right?
Yes.
That's the one lesson in understanding the language of an organization at that level, right?
Yeah.
And I had an advantage that my first really role in leadership meant, dealing with the external stakeholders as well. And I think one lesson that I've learned earlier on is having different kinds of mentors to actually be able to also impart some knowledge. What you do with it and how then you use that for you as you, it's a different thing. But I think that's one thing that I learned, that I keep on, it's a passion of mine, is that, you, as you navigate these positions, power, influence, and all that, it's great to have mentors that are interested in seeing you thrive. And they might not be necessarily vested. What I'm saying in terms of that if you achieve great things, it doesn't mean that they're gonna get the accolades for it. They just take an interest in you as a person, and then they just really, when you give them a call and say, I really am battling with this, or understanding this, and whatever, and all those kind of things, could you just unpack it for me? Because for me, I think it's key to mention this as well, Namhla. My also first role into it, having come from an engineering background, was obviously, everybody that was sitting around the table was male, and predominantly white males. And I don't know whether it was by design or whether it was the way it was for me. My mentors were of that type as well. It was white males that really, really took an interest in me, taking an interest in wanting my career to go in a certain way. And then they took an interest to give me just, 30 minutes of their time to just hear me out and ask my then silly questions, and be able to just guide me accordingly.
Nice. I love that. In terms of, one, understanding the language that is used at the different levels, but also associating yourself with mentors and people that actually see you and want to see you thrive.
Yeah.
As well as you taking the step towards those different people. And I suppose there's also the key element around being in an environment that has people that can give you the room and the space to be able to navigate.
Absolutely.
Which is important.
Yeah.
Which goes into the next question around culture, because being in the right environment that enables you to be able to thrive, I think, is very important. So culture can be very subtle, but also very powerful, depending on what that dominant culture actually feels like. So what kind of cultural behaviors have you seen that either help or hinder women leaders? Either you've experienced or have seen just in your different spaces that you've been.
So in my experience, and as I said, predominantly because the companies I've worked for were traditionally very male orientated type of companies. So one thing that I have observed, and it remains, is I say culture is let me come first there. Culture is the way that people behave, right? In an organization. And subtle might actually be meaning that those people that do those things don't understand that they're actually exclusive in doing that, in doing whatever that they're doing. So let me put it to you this way. Guys go on hunting trips. Okay, the majority of us females don't go and hunt, and that's where critical discussions or conversations happen. And how do you know that? You get into a meeting and you start realizing that, oh, okay, there was a prior conversation that I wasn't part of, so I can't really participate meaningfully because it looks like decisions have already been taken, made, or whatever the case might be, right? Whether it's done overtly or whatever the case might be. But those are some of the things in terms of how people show up. I've also had language. Now I'm going to talk about specifically language, where people will switch to a different language in a room and not have the sensitivity. And they're still talking about business. They're not talking about their own matters in whatever. They're talking about business and they switch into a different language. So that can also be very, it can exclude people from being able to participate in a conversation and that type of thing. So, however, where I've seen that and I felt that, being excluded because, things happen when you are not in a room and you quite quickly see that the meeting is being moved along very quickly. And you're like, oh, okay, we're supposed to have this discussion. What's happened? And then you hear people talking about, no, people lobby, and these are things that are not written anywhere. People lobby and and this matter was socialized at an evening with the beers with the guys or whatever the case might be, and you're like, I don't drink, so definitely I'll never be able to be there. But where I've found that for me, and it's having the confidence sometimes to just say, guys, can we all be in one conversation here? Especially when people code switch to a language. But being able to speak certain languages, sometimes people assume that I'm understanding, but it's not for me only, it's for those other people that are around as well, right? So so people can assume that then you hear, you understand, and therefore it's okay. So it's about bringing people back into that. And then it's the jokes, Namsha, that get to be passed along, that you're thinking, ooh, no, not a space. Not a space, it's not appropriate, and that type of thing. So but I think for me, where it has worked is also picking your fights and being able to just call it out when you see it. And then finding ways to be also included. And that can sort of go into this thing of trying to fit in as well, right? Because you are the only one in the room, and there is an understanding, a code in terms of how we sort of do things, because that's the culture. And now there's this oddball that we don't really know what to do with it, right?
What do you do with you?
So this oddball has come, and now we trying to figure out, is it the oddball going to fit, or is it us going to try and see whether we can work with the oddball? So yeah, it's quite a looking back, in hindsight, it's actually at times amusing and at times very disconcerting, if I can call it that.
Yes. No, definitely. And I think then follows them into the next question around, yes, there is this culture that is potentially also the dominant culture, but it's very covert in the sense that we're doing it, potentially are very unintentional about it, but that's just how it is, that it has operated. But at the end of the day, it is very overt for the person
Yeah.
that's experiencing it. It's very much
Yeah.
in their face and could hold them back depending on their personality. So do you find, and I think you've mentioned this and you chatted to this, that women still feel the pressure to fit in instead of leading authentically?
Oh,
And
absolutely.
how can organizations shift?
Yeah, sorry about that. So absolutely. And I think it's a, you know, so two things I just want to mention. So it all also
Mm,
depends at, at what level do you actually enter into the space, right? So
mm,
if you're coming from the top, there's already, ways of doing things, and I've experienced this, and
yeah.
you first have to start, trying to find your feet, trying to assert where you can make a difference, and what you actually have to offer to the company and that type of thing, right? And
Yes.
that can be even more difficult because you are new to the organization, you are still trying to just really suss out, and it's good to actually also take your time and not just try
Yes.
and jump in and want to be showing that I am in leadership and therefore I need to be the one calling the shots, right? And that's
Yes.
where leadership sometimes gets this thing of it's about calling the shots, and for me
Mm,
leadership is not really about calling the shots. It's about being able to be collaborative with those that you work with for superior solutions at the end of the day, because it's when we listen to each other's ideas, and then we then try and prime out of it what is the best way forward, and
yes.
guiding, and the leader's job is to facilitate and guide that, and coach and all those kind of things. So
Mm,
um so yes, the pressure is still there because there's still so few of us that are getting the seat or asking for it or are lucky enough to sort of fall into it, or whatever way that
mm,
different people end up there. So as a result, when you are just you and there's, as I said, the oddball, it can be a little bit difficult and all that. But once you
yes.
settle, I think for me it has been once I settle,
Mm,
I was telling you about, in my journey now, and authenticity and all that, it's
mm,
about making sure that you also make sure that others that are coming on board that might
mm,
be looked at as oddballs at different levels to be made to
mm,
feel welcome enough to understand that they can still be themselves. So it's about also creating that
mm,
environment. And that environment, you might not be able to create it at the top, but you might be able to create it for the space that you find yourself in, and the space to just bring other people in, so that
mm,
you can almost balance the scale, so as to speak, right? So
yes.
so organizations to shift. Yo, this one is a deep one, Namhla.
Mm,
So I'm reading a book at the moment that actually is describing this in a way that I never knew how to actually put it together. Executing
mm,
Strategy by Mark Morgan, Raymond Levitt, and William Malik.
mm,
They are, it's a Harvard study that they've done over the years and stuff like that, and they're talking about this thing. And I
yes.
think critical to it is, three questions that they pose is um, the identity of an organization plays a very, so who is this
Yeah.
organization, plays a very critical role in terms of whether the organization wants to shift or not, or needs to
Of
shift
course.
or not, right? Who is this organization? What is the purpose of this organization? Why do they exist? Why are they in business?
Mm,
And then they're long range. Are they short term in their nature? We have to get the P&L. We have to get the P&L, or they're balancing
mm,
that P&L, understanding where they're going in terms of their long range. And then that then defines how then we execute. And execute is that when I show up at my desk in the morning, what do I do first? Or what do I do for the rest of the day? It defines that.
mm,
So that's what strategy execution really is all about. And then overlaid with that then is, how do I behave to make sure that I am in line with the identity, I'm in line with the purpose, I'm in line with the long-term range, right? And then it comes back to,
mm,
what are we investing in to make sure that we are actually aligning all of these things together. So um I mean, organizations don't shift just because they're being told they need to shift. It's just like any change, right? People don't change just because somebody else tells them to change. You know, or just because somebody says it's good for you, you know, to change into this and do this and all those kind of things. I think when it's not, and I mean, I'm a proponent that says that when an organization cannot link all these changes to the three things that I've talked about, it becomes almost like it's either a veneer. We do it because, you know, we don't want to get into trouble, and therefore we don't go deep in because it's serving the bigger purpose of where the organization is going. It can be ESG, it can be any of these things that we know it's good for us going. But if it's not somehow in that vision, and it's not somehow in the purpose for our existence, and it's not somehow aligning with what we foresee ourselves in the next 40, 50, whatever number of years that we're going to be in operation, then it makes it very difficult, because then you're coming on the side. It's almost like a side project that just needs to be done because, you know, the year-end glossary annual packs must look good, must say the right things. But meantime, at the, you know, at where it touches the thing, it actually does not make sense, you know. And we all talk the right language. It says, yeah, but it's the right thing to do. It's the right thing, but it's not aligning anywhere with these three things that I've talked about. Then it becomes it actually, for me, it becomes a waste of time and a waste of resources, really, at the end of the day. You shift because you believe that it's part of what you require for your organization, not because somebody else tells you that it's the right thing to do, because then a lot of other bad things happen in that regard. People try and find ways to circumvent and all those kind of things. Do the minimum to just tick enough boxes, and then you realize that you've been investing all this money, but yet the company is not going where it needs to be going. And then you start having people making excuses that, yeah, it's because we have to invest in all these compliance things and and all those kind of things, because it's not central to what our company's identity, purpose, and vision is.
No, very, very true. Very true. I think what it is that you're speaking to is now speaking to the sort of like the identity of the business and what they deem to be pivotal for them to actually make the shift.
Yeah.
Because it's a huge organization.
Yeah.
So knowing that a number of organizations, I mean, South Africa has triple BE, the equity targets around women in leadership and so on and so forth, and or women in the company and so on and so forth. But when it is that we look at the equity targets and we look at the reports and so on and so forth, and then we look at the representation of the exco. We look at the representation that's in exco. We look at the representation that's sitting in the board, and what it is that it's saying. So there's a narrative that says those that sit in the board are, you know, determines what it is that the business is saying, who it is that they trust to actually run this business, right? So from your perspective, how do trust and power dynamics shape who actually gets to make decisions in leadership spaces? And this is from a gender perspective.
Yeah, so a few observations, and this is really observations. It's not backed up by any study or anything like that.
Yes.
I think what I observed is that often enough, you've got a very strong, not in brawn, but you've got a very very boisterous, you know, strong individual that they push through hard for their ideas, and they shut down other people and whatever. It might not even be, you know, the people that being given the charge to actually look over these things, but they have sway in how they present themselves with a lot of confidence and a bravado, and they force through their ideas all the time, you know, and they don't give space for to hear other people's thing, because they crowd out everyone. So you find that those people, in normal cases, they're the ones that sort of have this way of leading a company to wherever, you know, if you call it that way, in terms of decision making and that type of thing. So that I've observed in in a few companies that I've worked with, right? Where you have this individual that comes across as being, command and control, typical type of an individual, but, they also understand that they have to do that within the ambits of the fact that they are not the positional leader, right? And they push through the ideas and all those kind of good things. So often enough, you find that, and that can be very disruptive for an organization that's got a vision and a purpose that is trying to drive, the whole for, everyone, which means everyone is actually here, and your voice is also just as important as the next person in terms of what you're about to say. So I find that is more pervasive in a lot of companies than not, because that is still happening quite a lot. It's that individual. And unfortunately, in my experience, that individual has always been white and male. In terms of what I've seen, in terms of that, and they've got a nature about them in being able to understand who the most important stakeholder is. I talked about lobbying and socializing earlier on. They know how to also navigate those things and go and socialize and lobby with the people that they know that will most certainly challenge and and get them to just come down and listen to everybody. So that's really what I've sort of noted and observed over the last while, is that we're not there yet in being able to get to be inclusive enough to have an understanding of listening to everybody else. Some leaders that I've observed that are not that, and they're in a position, if they're very good at keeping the purpose and the vision and the identity in their heads, they're able to actually come down the space long enough to make sure that everybody, and often, with these boisterous figures, it's about you rush through the meeting or you rush through a conversation so that, the decision that I wanted is made and then is whatever. But I've seen some leaders managing to calm down the space long enough to be able to listen to everybody else and then get consensus going that way. And it frustrates out of the people that just came with an agenda, right?
Yes, yeah.
So that's what I've also observed on the other side. So you can then imagine, you are, as a new person in a leadership role at that level, trying to also still, figure out, who's who and how do we make decisions in this organization. It can be unnerving in a lot of ways until you figured how to actually navigate all of this, right? And that's where the mentors actually come in very, very handy at that stage.
No, I
can't remember what was if I answered all your questions.
You answered the question about your view as it relates to the people that are actually being put in the exco and the board. Is it on the basis of the fact that they are the ones that are trusted and given the power dynamics to lead the organization, or is it an individual aspect where it's like, oh, it's just because this individual did the lobbying, the socializing, and so on and so forth, in order for them to be seen more than, let's say, for example, other women leaders or whatever the case may be.
Yeah. So and I just want to point out another thing. I mean, that's the recruitment side of things, right? So and many of us, when we get to those roles, chances are we are headhunted, right? And the other chance is that when you say given the role as such, the other side is that somebody already sitting at the seat speaks on your behalf. And that carries a lot of weight in terms of who then gets to be seen as being qualified to be at the seat, or at the table rather, or sitting in a seat, right? So that also has got a dynamic of its own in terms of that.
Yes. Yeah. No, I hear you. And I suppose my question around it is to say, as a country that's over 30 years in its democracy, and 30 years on, and we look at some of different organizations and who's in leadership and whatnot, are we still saying that in those 30 years we still would not have the ability to be able to have an exco that's relatively balanced from a gender perspective, regardless of what and how sort of like systems work that doesn't, so what balance looks like, rather than having a sort of like an exco of 12 and having 2 females. We're saying that after 30 years, we could as a business only find 2 females, and these 10, sort of like over the years. And that's kind of like the question to kind of start unpacking, to say, what are the opportunities that are there in order to kind of start creating that shift. Because if we leave it at that, then we'll have another 20 years.
No, 300 years, as you said and stated.
Yes, it will be another 300 years.
Yeah, and clearly, and where I was going and alluding to how people get recruited into these positions, it's exactly that, right? So if you've got the same kind of people sitting in those seats, chances are most of them do not interact with other people outside, the people that are same and as themselves, and being able to just go and recruit for that kind of thing, right? And then when I don't know, what gets to be the brief when certain of these headhunters are given the brief to go look for people and that type of thing. And for me, I think actually we missed the boat by trying to fix the problem at the top only. Okay, yes. I just think for me, and it goes back to those three things that I talked about. If an organization understands that it doesn't matter what products or services you're selling, right? You've got just over 50% of, and I just keep it simple, 50% of people that will likely influence, buy, or buy via somebody else your services are females, right? And yet you are continuously leaving them out of the conversation in terms of them not having a seat at the table. Identity, purpose, and vision. You are likely to be driving your business down a certain route, right? So yes. I'm just thinking that if you fundamentally understand the economics of it, right? Just park, let's park, what the government says and what have you and all those. For me, it makes a commercial sense, 100%. It doesn't matter whether you're selling consulting services, you're selling transportation of whatever you're selling. It doesn't matter. But ultimately, there's somebody that eventually buys those services that via your supply chain have got an input, and that in its nature is, you are saying that you are leaving 50% of the nation out, or whatever the case might be, to be able to not reach them. I saw a very scary number saying that 80% of spend is actually in the hands of women, right? Maybe women are also not, and I now take a shot left, right? Maybe women are also not as conscious in their buying, so that they can understand, if I'm buying this product and I look at, because women have got the power to change this thing from grassroots, not even in the boardrooms, right? To change it from grassroots. If I've got the wherewithal and awareness of where do these products come from and who is in all this, and it's awareness, it's education, is all, who is all in the supply chain, you can change this thing from the ground up, And then for organizations, I think for me, it's about investing in the people that are in your organization. And I'm not saying go and invest in just female, or invest in such a way that you are showing, and long range means you wanting to sustain your business. It doesn't matter what your vision is. It just means that you want to have a sustainable business. And I think very few people, come into business to just make ssure that in 20 years that their businesses don't exist, right? Everybody comes into business thinking that I am in this thing for the long haul and whatever. Yes, maybe you sell it over to somebody else that actually does something else with it and make sure that it survives, for whatever. So for me, I think where we've always been missing the boat in organizations is being able to just grow people within your organization. Some people do a very good job of doing that. And I've been a beneficiary of a system like that when I worked for Unilever. And I'm sorry I mentioned them because they were doing a very, very fantastic job at the time, you know. And then you get them to a certain level. Yes, of course. Positions get to be lesser and lesser as you go up the pyramid. But make sure that you've got enough that can actually go into that pyramid when you need them, right? So that is where I think we are still missing in terms of the work that's been done in the HR space or whatever the case might be. We somehow are not meeting somewhere there in making sure that we're developing the people and we are able to keep them. Yes, you can lose them to industry, but those are your people for the future when their position becomes available because you know that they've been through and you've grown them and whatever. So I think that that's where the 30 years or whatever period of time that we've been at this thing have been lost on that. They've been lost on the ability to just be able to just get people being developed, groomed, mentored through and do a proper mentorship, because there's a lot of money that's spent on mentorship as well that doesn't give results. But do a proper, and that's one area of that I'm really, really quite passionate about. Do a proper job and make sure that these people are ready when they're supposed to be ready. They might not be in your organization, but they are somewhere else. Because, Namtra, I'm tired of people saying this thing of saying, but we can't find them. We can't find them. Who's supposed to make sure that they exist in the first place? And that's when, if you say that as an organization, you need to really take a very, very hard look at what have you been doing in your development and all those kind of good things, because it's on you. Who's supposed to develop people for you?
No, definitely. Because I think, as he had mentioned earlier on, the culture, the dominant culture is there, and it supports a certain either narrative or a certain I won't say people gender, or it has a certain gender or being that it actually supports at the end of the day, if we're being honest.
Absolutely.
And the question is, how is it as organizations, do we have the clarity to say what's coming out on the top is potentially telling us what our culture is comfortable with, that we actually now need to start shifting and shaping so that we start to see the different results coming through also at the top. I agree, it starts at the grassroots and it has to find its way in the systems that need to build it. But if the systems are building it and then eventually we aren't seeing the voices and the difference within the strategic leadership positions, then that means that, well, for me, that there's still some internal work that we need to do. But your next question is, when you are sitting on the board, because now you sit on boards as well, what signs tell you that this company's culture truly supports women leaders? Because as I mentioned earlier on, we've got boards that have 12 people that are sitting in Exco. We've got Excos that have got 12 people sitting there, and then 2 are females, the rest the other 10 are all male. And this has been the case for the past 10, 15 years. So as a board member, what are some of the things that you're saying that you're looking out to say, of asking the question beyond the numbers that you're seeing?
Yeah, so statistics are just that, right? They're just numbers, at the end of the day. I think it's I saw, somebody put it very nicely and say stories behind the numbers, right? So it's understanding the stories behind the numbers, because the stories will tell a picture. And for me, Namhla, I think what I look for, yes, it's actually looking around the room and having an understanding. And again, it's about, that conversation as I said earlier on about, where are they, how are we grooming them and all those kind of things. I think, where are we grooming them? For me, there's telltale signs, right? There's nothing stopping a board member from walking the floor of an organization that they are at the top and the helm of, right? There's really nothing stopping them to do those side visits and those, they tell a lot of stories, because a board meeting might be 2 hours long, it might be 3 hours long, we're all sitting in the office and all those kind of things. They don't really often tell the full picture of what is it that you are actually you are directing, at the end of the day. So it's about being able to just give yourself time to walk the floors as a director or a non-exec, and not the ones that are with pomp and ceremony, red carpet, everybody be at their best behavior, because it's coming. And if an organization does that, obviously then it means that they have something to hide. And I'm never comfortable with that. If there is, there has to be, a proper organized way that when the board that's supposed to be these important people, which it's just we're given different titles. We are all just as important in the cog and in trying to get this thing going and doing what it's supposed to be doing. So I think for me, there is big lessons in being able to go and visit your operations and that type of thing. And be aware when an organization, wants to know what is it about, what do you want to see, as if you are now trying to police the executive, and that's not what it is. It's just to come and see, and feel it and smell it, in terms of just seeing how it's translated on the ground, because you will see, who's all sitting in the office, who's all, who's all, doing the spanner works, who's all, you'll see it. It's you cannot hide that. You'll see it, and when you have conversations with people that work in that company, you'll also get to see that guys are actually intentional about it. And then you look at their investment. What are they investing on? And what are those investment translating on? I'll give you an example of a board that I'm sitting on without mentioning too much, in that. So a lot of investment goes into this development and what have you. And then people are exited. Then there's nothing, because now they got to go figure out. They've got these skills. They've got to go figure out what they do with them. But they found a way to just make sure that it feeds into the organization. It feeds into the client space. It feeds into even some of the competitors. They actually, headhunting people from there. And it's almost the example that I was giving earlier on about Unilever, because Unilever was known as being the best development grounds for people, with the ability to manage and lead an organization in a manufacturing space and that type of thing. Back in the day, I'm not sure now, I've been gone there for a long time. But you look at those programs, are these investments bearing fruit in terms of what then happens? What happens afterwards? You've gone and given money to all these disabled people or young women or young people in general. What happens is now again identity, purpose, vision hanging along that. And if it is, you will see it's so seamless in the way that people don't have to try and figure out what do we do, because now we have to patch up and so that we can get our points for BE and God knows. It just is seamless. And again, as I say to you, people will never shift their organizations until such time that they see that or understand that it actually all hangs together. It's all connected, and you will be surprised how many organizations still push the profit motive without understanding what the sustainability of the business is going to look like. If we don't have a planet to live on, you do not have a business. Can you not even understand that? It's just as simple as that. It doesn't need to be, some EU, the United Nations trying to convince everybody that this is the right thing to do. But at the end of the day, you must also look at, coming back to that question, how are your executives actually incentivized over time? What are the things that they are spending or they're being asked to spend their time on so that they can execute? And I think when we started looking at short-termism in terms of how executives are being remunerated, you've got a 5-year term, you must do what you need to do, and then you are out. Next guy, it's like the coaching of teams these days, right? You're not allowed to grow a team and get it to. You're supposed to come in and just get it to just win and whatever. The same applies with the organizations, right? It's this whole thing that is being pushed, the narrative that's being pushed, that yes, we understand that we have to look at your ESGs and we have to look at your transformation. We have to look at where you're going with all of those things, no child labor and whatever. But at the back of the day, when shareholders start talking to you, the biggest thing that they are also interested in is shareholder value. So it's all those conversations that we're having and the narrative that you hear in the media with big corps and all those kind of corporations and all that, that we are not there yet. We're still having the conversation that drives this short-termism in its nature.
Very true. So powerful. Thank you very much. And our last question is to say, if you could speak directly to the next generation of women leaders stepping into executive roles today, what one piece of advice would you give them about leading with influence and authenticity? So now they've been in the corporate, they're now moving into executive roles. What's your one advice to give them to lead with influence, but also very important with authenticity?
Yeah, I'll go back to my lesson, my personal lesson that I started off, find a mentor coach, to just, help you through that whole thing, in terms of how you show up. And I told you earlier on, for me, it took, I don't know, and it doesn't have to take that long, It took me, I don't know how many years to start, showing up authentically myself at work, Yes, my speak and all that, I've been one that has been guided by my values all of my career, and nothing but that has guided me, and that's what I hang on to as being authentically what defines me. And then I started looking at my outer way of looking, and I'm like, oh, no. I'm done trying to fit in so hard, and I started showing up in my African bright colors and that type of thing. And everybody around me was commenting on, wow, okay, this looks nice. This looks more like you. It aligns with your personality and your loudness and what. So I think even in that, I think it's for new coming in, and it's those that are still left in those roles, is that, if you don't show up authentically, you are doing an injustice to those. Because one thing that I learned, and recently more so, I just don't think I've done great things in my career. I've just been doing my thing here,
Okay,
and somebody, I was at the conference 2 weeks ago, and somebody, sent something and said, just beware, somebody's watching you and thinking that, you are a role model for them, even though you might not. So somebody's watching, at the end of the day. And for me, my advice to them as well is that even as a newbie and a wannabe new leader in that, somebody will definitely be looking up to you. So it's your actions that are going to define what happens with the next lot that comes in. It's not what I'm going to say. It's going to be how I show up, what I do, how I make others feel around me. That's going to make other people say, oh, okay, so that's how this thing is supposed to be done, rather than how it's done, So that's, for me, it will be, I mean, I know I've said a mouthful, but I think it will be some of the things that I would just say, beware how you show up, because somebody's watching up, looking at you and saying, wow, I just don't know how they do it. Wow, I want to understand a piece of that and be one day like that person, for better or worse. You could not be showing up in a positive light, and somebody's still watching you and say, oh, okay, I think I want to show up like that. How do I minimize myself to show up like that? Or you could be authentically showing up, and somebody says, oh, okay, that one gives me permission also to be who I want to, who I am, in the space. And then we can give up all the, we can I call them sideshows. Then once you show up authentically, we don't have to worry about getting the job done, because we're focusing on the other stuff that is not adding value. We focus on getting the job done, So that, for me, is where I'm saying, if we are not authentic, we have to worry about they're not being authentic as being the sideshows, and often those take so much space and time and they exhaust you, and they actually add zero value to what we need to be doing.
Sure. That is so true and so powerful. I love how it is that you zoned in on the importance of showing up authentically, and how showing up authentically is actually influential.
Yeah.
Because you don't know who's watching, whether they're watching you as a role model, or they're watching you to say, oh, so all of these years and all of this time, we haven't made room for this this gender or this type or whatever,
Yeah.
and we've been missing out on this. Now, sort of like leading the leaders, basically. By how it is that you've chosen to show up authentically, to give yourself room to grow, and to also make sure that you've got people that are supporting you, that are mentoring you through the process as well.
Yeah,
Very, very powerful.
absolutely. And I'm always,
Thank you.
sorry,
Yeah.
I always say my hand is up. Whoever is saying, please, I'm always up for helping the ones that needs to be coming. I'm here to serve.
Because one of the things that I wanted to ask before I close is, what caused your shift? Because you mentioned that it took you a couple of years to shift into your authentic self, from kind of like from seeing what happens, okay, let me try fit in. And then at some point you're like, no, I am going to show up as my authentic self. What was the shift that happened with you?
I think for me,
or when was the shift?
Yeah, so for me personally, I think it was a matter of being comfortable in the value that I bring.
Ooh.
Yeah, I think it was being comfortable in the fact that I bring value. I've got something to contribute. I'm making an impact. Therefore, I don't have to look like something else. And that's the one thing. And the other thing was the feedback I was getting from my from those that I was leading. And it wasn't always my peers, the feedback that I was getting, Namsha. It was the feedback from people lower in the ranks of an organization giving me feedback and saying, yo, you're doing such, maybe validation, I don't know, that you are really, and we like the way that you do things, and I thought, okay, I can actually look like the way I do things. I think that was what it was. It was just probably coming off my own in terms of understanding that I am bringing value.
It's a powerful point.
Yeah, so I think that was for me where the outside stuff is all peripheral, but they are also powerful. So I'm just thinking that for me, it was about aligning everything with what I've always been all about in my speak, in how I do things, in how I challenge what is not right, and all these kind of things, and say, oh, therefore, I don't have to be straight jacket and what, because straight jacket just is not me, and it doesn't really resonate, and it feels a bit constricting and whatever. So yeah, so I think for me, that was what it was,
Love it.
Yeah.
Absolutely love it. Thank you very much, Boikanyo, for your time and for your insights. Really love them. There's so much meat that came out of it. And yes, thank you for joining me.